Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind ThatKaitoDan, and first things first, sorry there's been a lack of content lately. A trip back to England recently and some nasty tech issues with my camera has hindered some of my promised videos, but I do promise to get things rolling soon, and hopefully in time for what's coming up next. Cause folks, if you haven't heard yet, today we will be getting the return of some bite-sized bonkers fun in the world of Remnant with RWBY Chibi's second season. So to celebrate, I decided to look back on the previous season and pick out 10 of my favourite skits from the bunch. And yes, this is my personal top 10, so my rankings may vary to your own. If you want to compare though, be sure to go and share some of your favourites in the comments down below. Also, there will be some spoilers to the skits in question and the main show as well, so please watch with caution. With that tidbit done, let's count down my top 10 favourite RWBY Chibi Season 1 skits. Number 10. Ren Makes Pancakes from Episode 11. Until Volume 4 came around, the pair of Ren and Nora were lacking in some worthwhile screen time compared to the rest of the major cast, but RWBY Chibi was the break that they needed. Ren especially had been needing some time in the spotlight. We know he's very calm, studious, and the most mature one of the team's sloth pair, but what makes this skit work is seeing just how far his buttons could be pressed to their limit when dealing with his energized partner, even when it comes to something simple like pancakes. There's some excellent comedic timing on display here, with each of Ren's failed attempts to keep his tasty treats safe. And there's just something about seeing Ren's broken composure that just makes me smile. Same as well for seeing Nora still craving for more, even when bloated and defeated. Plus it's still got some joy to be found in Ren accepting this mess as just another typical bonkers day for the two, though with a touch of sweet payback looming overhead. Just one of the many skits with these two involved that was a blast to watch, and it's not the last to make this list either. Number 9. Jean Experiments from Episode 7. Let's face it, we'd all love a badass weapon like the folks in RWBY have. They're just so creative and wickedly fun, which is why I love this skit so much, because I'd be right there in Jean's shoes. I can't blame the guy for wanting to mess with something a bit more unique than his iconic yet simple sword and shield, and since I do see a lot of myself in the goofball, I can definitely picture my own bit of roleplay going on messing around with Team RWBY's gear if I had the chance. He's like a little kid mimicking the stuff that he's seen on TV. It's just so positive and fun, and it's kind of hard to hate, and Miles' light-hearted voice work cements that tone as well, gleefully play acting and making a complete ass of himself, clearly out of his league wielding these stylishly tough weapons. Tease him all you want, but I think the blonde was the perfect guy to bring to life a little fantasy that I'm sure all RWBY fans have. Number 8. Shadow People from Episode 5. If you can't laugh at yourself, who can you laugh at? Gotta love when shows poke fun at themselves. Case in point, this skit, which welcomed back some old yet barely distinguishable faces. A common sight in Volume 1, Shadow People were the basic models used to populate the world of Remnant, covered head to toe in a pitch black with no major features to them, so the crewbie would have more time available to spend working on the actually important visuals. Obviously in the world itself, these folks would just look like normal people, but to us, it was like spotting an anime protagonist in a crowd. With visual improvements coming in later volumes, this process was removed for actual detailed models, but this skit brought them back so Team RWBY could actually address their existence as a real thing. Right down to the fact that some of them even had traits borrowed from established characters. Again, I love that Chibi allowed the crewbie a chance to throw some self-referential humor at us via one of the more, ironically, noticeable elements of its past, and the reactions of Team RWBY to the oddity felt very natural for that added pop to the strange sight. I'm glad the series did grow out of this trick in the long run, but this segment was a fun nostalgia trip of sorts, as a fan of the show since day one. Number 7. The Fourth Wall from Episode 6. Coming off the back of the main show's biggest and most dramatic volume, RWBY Chibi did serve as a nice counter element to some of the dark and heartbreaking moments that we witnessed. but there was a debate forming in the fandom early on about how close would Chibi stick to canon events, especially in regards to certain characters making an appearance despite their recent deaths. So it only makes sense that our answer came from Nora smashing the fourth wall so hard that we get a returning Pyrrha as a result. While not the most comedic skit of the show, outside of Nora's distractions, it was still very pleasing to see Pyrrha again, and it did allow viewers to ease their concerns. And yeah, Nora's loud and fierce denial of anything having gone wrong was the right buffer to not only answer the question, but also make it a funny scene overall, and it made for a strong way to bring in Team Juniper as a whole once more. Simple, but effective. A positive way to let us think, even for a moment, that nothing bad ever happened. Ever. Number 6. Cat Burglar from Episode 2. Of course, the previous skit wasn't the first time that we hear Jem Brown in Chibi. This next scenario brought her back, and with everyone's favourite newscaster, Lisa Lavender, for another round of RWBY's cat puns. Even in the main show there's been jokes made due to Blake being a literal cat person, so it wasn't a shock to see that continue in the comedy spin-off. From Lisa's many kitty puns about the cat burglar on the prowl, to Blake being instantly deemed a possible candidate by her teammates simply for being a nimble cat person, this skit is a pun lover's dream. But what makes this skit more than just a pun fest is the true joke behind it all. It could have easily had stopped at Blake being accused of being the guilty feline with a thieving spree, but it turns out Blake is the thief, and the mixture of Erin's great job selling Blake's faked hurt feelings, on top of the cat girl thieving as she's trying to get out of Dodge, delivered a great punchline. Also, if you slow down or take a picture at the right moment when Blake's acquiring her getaway ride, the animators even made her go full on cat mode, with running on all fours, her fawness ears being on display, and her eyes having vertical cat-like slits. Just that extra bit of detail that adds to one of the best jokes at poor Belladonna's expense. Number 5. Tired Blake from Episode 14. And speaking of jokes at Blake's expense, Chibi took the cat girl's displeasure over Ruby's pup Zwei and turned it into one of the spin-off's biggest running gags, with several skits based on the corgi making the poor girl's life a living hell. Even then, it turns out the skit that I loved the most from this odd rivalry was one of the most heartwarming moments in the entire franchise. After the terror that is a brutal exam, Blake's only comfort is her hairy nemesis, but instead of more torment, the little guy just wants to play and offer some unauthorized snuggles that Blake eventually accepts in a moment that I won't deny did make me go, aww. Especially after all the ups and downs that Blake had had not just in Chibi, but in the main show itself. The animations for Zwei, by the way, are fantastic. He's always been having that right balance of cartoony yet lifelike mannerisms to his movements that really helped make the little guy become such a lovable man in the first place, and I think this skit was a prime example of that quality. The corgi acting just like a playful dog would, while still having more character to him than your average pooch. It is, to be fair, a gag that does work best when you've seen the previous ones from this running gag, but even then with the skit flipping the joke on its head, it still does the trick as both a chuckle-worthy bit of visual humour and a positive warm sight to see. Now if only I had a Zwei plushie to snuggle for my own. Number 4. Dance Practice from Episode 23. This one is another skit where Ren shines bright, but there's plenty to enjoy from the rest of his Juniper buddies too. I'll admit, as random as it was, I did love the Juniper dance from Volume 2. It was a sweet piece of cheesy goofiness after all the drama going on between Jean and Pyrrha, and damn if it wasn't a well choreographed dance at the same time. I did wonder though if this was planned beforehand from the foursome, or if it was just something they thought up on the spot. Maybe it's just a popular dance craze in Remland like RWBY's version of the Macarena. But Chibi gave us some kind of answer, with everyone's favourite B team finding it tough going at first to learn. Ren, as I said before, was excellent here as the no-nonsense instructor, because of course he had to be the one in charge of dancing here, doubled up with some of Neve's best vocal work for that added punch that really showed just how emotive the guy can be. Not only that, but there's something oddly entertaining about seeing the super talented Pyrrha struggle with dancing, as well as seeing Jean acting more like a drama queen than usual, and Nora just breaking down from it all, while Ren is doing his best to make sure everyone is following his directions. This just works for me so well since, in my eyes, Team Juniper have such a strong group bond that they usually give off the vibe of a second family relationship. So seeing this all break apart for something so trivial is just hilarious to me. In that sense, seeing them break down in this comedic tone is just perfect, as it's such a contrast to the norm, making their breakdown all the more brilliant and providing one of the best Team Juniper skits in the entire show. Number 3. A Slip Through Time and Space, from episode 23. God bless Nora. She's always been a bundle of energy that just livens up any scene that she's involved with, but man, she must be tough to deal with at times. I feel for you, Ren, especially if she gets even more hyper than usual like this. While the opening moments are a little dragged out for me and thus why it only just misses out on the top 2, the rest of this scene is just brilliant, as we see what happens when you mix the bubbly embodiment of sugar with caffeine. And boy, what a trip. One jug full down the pipe and off we go into a wild dive with some crazy changes to the scene, such as heads being swapped, other characters appearing, including double shopkeeps, and even some junior detective facial hair popping up. But of course, it wouldn't be a Nora freakout without one more fourth wall break. That's so big, it leads to a live action appearance from Nora's voice actress Samantha Ireland. Even then, we still get more chuckles, and it just wraps up an insane but unforgettable skit. It's a long one for such a simple gag, but when you get the right tweaks to it, it can make something hilarious, and that's why I can't help but break down into laughs every time I watch this. Number 2. Little Red Riding Hood, from episode 12. A lot of what happens in RWBY stems from its elements being inspired by either history or, in this case, fairy tales, and that did continue into Chibi, which took the basic premise of a school play gone wrong and made gold with it. Everything was spot on, from the cheap stage effects to the bouncy music, but especially so with the roles that each Team RWBY girl brought to life. One big positive is the fact that the crewbie didn't just rest on the obvious casting jokes. Yeah, RWBY did have to be Red Riding Hood, and she makes her a pure badass, but she's also the brains behind the play, so while she's giving it her all, she's also brilliantly freaking out as her play keeps falling apart around her. Naturally, Blake did have to play the big bad wolf, but she's also far from happy with the ordeal, not helped by Zwei still causing her misery, and she delivers her lines with her trademark dryness, which did make for a good contrast to Yang's performance, the Spitfire going to great and silly lengths just to make her small role have an impact, while Weiss is just too busy trying to understand her role in prop to actually get to act. What really helps sell this skit is the narration, being provided by Ozpin. I've said in the past that Shannon McCormick's voice feels so natural for narration, it almost feels like he's reading me a story instead of just sharing a ton of information. So having him doing just that for a play was the perfect extra touch. And he's not shy of joining in on the jokes too, alongside a short cameo from Port adding to the chuckles. I've seen a lot of these play gags, and this for me was one of the best. Tons of jokes that felt fresh, wonderful presentation, and the right additions to make one of the messiest outcomes become one of the best skits in the season. And now for my number 1 favorite season 1 skit, RWBY Makes Cookies, from episode 1. That's right, the very first skit from the very first episode is my personal favorite, and I loved it even before the first episode came out. For those that don't know, during the Volume 1 cinema screenings, there was a sneak peek at the then upcoming RWBY Chibi, and I still remember me and everyone else watching just laughing our heads off at some of the skits that we had an early look at, especially this bit of adorable mayhem. Rooster Teeth are excellent when it comes to physical humour, and when you mix that up with RWBY, who is such a bright spark of energy that she just feels right at home as a comedy character, then you get a match made in heaven, and that was proven right from the start. Thanks as well to the 5-star directing and animation, which was very necessary for a scene all about visual humour. There's barely any dialogue to speak of, and yet you still see RWBY's big pool of emotions and vibrant movements tell you enough about her highs and lows in the kitchen, with each messy fumble or happy bite into some chocolate. So many highlights from the skit comes from just her expressions alone, like her silently smirking before pigging out, or the little twitch of her foot as we suddenly cut back to her just drowning in chocolate bites while chilling in the sink. It's one of the most bouncy and light-hearted skits of the entire lot, which did an amazing job of showcasing the kind of oddball sides that we were gonna see moving forward, and for that, I loved it. It set the tone for the spin-off, it's picture perfect in its visuals, and I just can't help but smile or laugh whenever I watch it even now, while it also serves as a reminder of a wonderful night that I had with fellow RWBY fans, and thus, it's my favourite skit from our first taste of RWBY Chibi goodness. So that's my list. Were there any on there that you also like? What about some that missed out? Be sure to share your favourites in the comments below, and maybe even chat about skits and characters that you would like to see pop up in the second season. I'll once again be doing reactions for RWBY Chibi, so if you want to make sure you get each new video as they drop, hit the subscribe and bell buttons below, and follow me on Twitter through the link in the description to catch up on the latest posts about RWBY, future content from me, or just anything else on my mind. Until next time though, have a good day or good night, and peace out.